Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Massive rumours emerging that Lando Norris to Red Bull is not out of the realms of possibility as soon as next season. Nico Rosberg says that from the rumours he's heard in the paddock over the last couple of days, Lando Norris is on the move, potentially as soon as next season. Is that to Red Bull? Is that maybe to Aston Martin, who have also shown interest in other drivers over the last couple of weeks? Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Now, speaking of the Red Bull programme in general, Daniel Ricciardo, we believe, will not be back until at least Qatar. That is what we're currently hearing. Makes sense maybe. Singapore is probably too early and frankly is too challenging from a technical and physical perspective for Ricciardo to do. Suzuka in some ways isn't too dissimilar and is only a week later, so Ricciardo back for Qatar, only 6 races from then to the end of the season. Also, we saw some tyre tests happening. We actually had some numbers from these. The laps completed, especially at Monza. Checo Perez, we'll talk about him in a second, did a 1:23.5 at best. Ocon in the Alpine did a 1:25.5, not too dissimilar to what Gasly did today, who did roughly a 1:24.9. And Charles Leclerc at Foriano did a 59.2 with 130 laps. Yesterday, Sainz at 153 laps with the best of a 59.4. So not particularly relevant, but I thought kind of interesting nonetheless. Now, yesterday we saw all the talking points with, Helmut Marko having a go at Sergio Perez. Now, the actual quotes here were, lots of people have looked into these quotes. Now, I've seen different translations of these quotes. Some people have translated his comments to say Checo Perez is inconsistent because he's Mexican, and others have said he says that Checo Perez is inconsistent and he's, South American, Mexican, whatever. Mexico, not really South America, but still, there's some questionable comments going around, as you often see from the Red Bull camp from time to time. But the point behind it, regardless of the intent of the words, is nonetheless the same. Perez isn't going to be their man. Helmut Marko doesn't really believe in him especially, and he will be gone once his contract is done, if not potentially before. We saw the wording yesterday that Perez is too old, he's not always focused, and Lando Norris would be the ideal man. Unfortunate, as Red Bull say, that his contract is for so long. Also clarifying, if you guys didn't see yesterday's video, that Norris to Toro Rosso was even a possibility back in 2019, but then the McLaren thing happens, and he's been there since that point. However, Red Bull would love to have Norris, Max would love to have Norris. Would Norris love to go to Red Bull? That's another question, but I think he would, I think any driver that really believes in themselves surely would take an opportunity to be in what is very likely going to be the championship winning car next season. And yes, you go into Max's den, it's a massive challenge to take on Max, but if you really think that you've got what it takes to be a world champion, you've got to back yourself in those type of scenarios, I would say. The question is whether McLaren would allow Norris to go. Now, Zach Brown does like a bit of money, and if there's money coming in, a buyout in play, sponsorship deals possible, then sure, I'm sure they can come to a potential agreement there. And Red Bull seem keen to make this happen. And, he's on a contract for another couple of seasons. Lando's stock is at a very high moment right now. McLaren have Piastri performing in qualifying and race pace quite similarly to Norris, it must be said, in the recent couple of races. So this is when Nico Rosberg wades into this whole discussion and says the following: where is Norris going? Where's he going? Next year already, I hear there is a switch coming. So, of course, Rosberg was in the paddock this last weekend in Monza, and he reckons that he's heard that, Norris is on the move. Now, where is he on the move to? That's a question, but you've got to think that if this is true, do we believe Rosberg? Maybe not. We haven't really heard this from other, let's say, more valid, maybe journalistic sources, but look, Rosberg knows a thing or two about the sport. I'm sure he has his contacts in the sport and in the paddock, and potentially the word on the street is that Norris is going to be out of McLaren as soon as 2024, just next season. With all the Red Bull talk, it feels like Norris to Red Bull is a legitimate possibility, especially given that they don't really want Perez there. Certainly beyond his contract in 25, and even for next season, it seems likely as well they'd want to get rid of him if they could. I mean, they've been pretty blatant and say that, if Norris is gettable, we will get him. But then, of course, they say, well, we can't get him because he's got a contract, so that's unfortunate. But look, what do contracts mean here in Formula 1? There's always a way around them. Where there is a will, there is potentially a way. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean for sure that it's going to be Red Bull, if he even is going to move. And lots of people would say, well, there's no way McLaren let them go. But, I think they quite possibly could. And let's be honest, McLaren, despite making some progress this season, they're not quite Red Bull, and even for the next, let's say, decade, at least, let's say, beyond the 2026 regulations, they're still going to be a Mercedes customer team, and I don't think McLaren are winning a championship anytime soon. So Norris, if he wants to win a championship, will have to leave, I would say. Whether that's to Mercedes in the future, or if there's a Red Bull opportunity, it just makes a lot of sense. Maybe it doesn't make so much sense from Red Bull's perspective if you want to ensure that Max is always going to be the number one guy, but even then, right, I don't think it's too much of a risk. I mean, if you put Norris and Max Verstappen together, surely that's got to be the best driver pairing on the grid. So, look, I think that it works for most parties involved if they can find a relationship that makes sense with McLaren to potentially buy him out of the contract. Now, there is also the Aston Martin possibility. They've made some good steps. Now, if I was Norris, would I trust Aston over McLaren right now? I'm not sure that I would. I don't, both Mercedes customer teams, I don't know if that's necessarily a point of view, but actually it was discussed just yesterday again that Helmut Marko says that they spoke to the Monegasque, i.e. Charles Leclerc, at the end of May to see if he would leave Ferrari. And then Helmut Marko said, because he revealed everything, Aston Martin also tried a move before us. They're looking for a top driver for when Alonso leaves the team. So kind of saying like Stroll's going to stay, but we don't know for sure if Stroll is going to stay. With some rumours emerging that might not necessarily be the case for too much longer. So Aston Martin seem to be in the driver market, or at least having conversations with drivers about making some changes in the near future. And therefore, if Aston Martin are looking at potentially Leclerc, surely they would also potentially be looking at Norris. Now, whether that's Norris and Alonso, whether that's, Norris for Alonso and Alonso to Red Bull, I don't know, like that'd be entertaining. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be entertaining nonetheless. I don't know, it seems interesting, right? Where else would Norris go? Like, there's no other options. There's not Mercedes. Maybe Ferrari next year if they want to kick Sainz out, but I don't know why Ferrari would kick Sainz out before the end of his deal. It's not like he's performing anywhere nearly as badly with respect to Leclerc as Perez is with respect to Verstappen, and, he's not costing Ferrari anything right now because they're not fighting for the championship, really, at least this season. So I don't think they'll kick Sainz out early. They might not renew his deal, but I don't think they're going to kick him out. So where else could Norris go but probably Red Bull, right? Like, if Norris is on the move for next season, there really isn't any other viable team, unless Stroll decides to retire, than Red Bull. So yeah, Nico Rosberg, reading between the lines there, sounds like Norris to Red Bull is a legitimate chance. Now, obviously there's negotiations that would have to go down for this to be the case. It would be very exciting if this was to be the case, and Nico Rosberg is throwing all the drama out there right now during this kind of, well, hopefully what will actually become a rather entertaining, silly season period, because there hasn't been much happening this year. Not many crazy driver moves or anything like that. This would be a blockbuster one, and frankly, if Red Bull are going to build, again, the strongest car for next season, it will at least give us some entertainment before the season's even begun, who is going to win the World Championship guaranteed. It'd be very interesting to see what Norris could do against Verstappen in the same machinery. While you've still got to favour Verstappen, of course, Norris, if he does back himself to put up a fight, could be a really interesting season ahead. A couple of other things here as well. There's been talk about Andretti, and the rumour is that the FIA are imminently going to approve Andretti's Formula 1 bid, and they will be allowed to enter the sport. The issue is, it's not just F1, or it's not just the FIA, that choose these things. It's then the Formula 1 teams, and like the ownership itself, and, Liberty Media. So Andretti actually even say on their site yesterday, coming soon, this pursuit to join the FIA Formula 1 World Championship. So they're confident they're going to get in. Now, will the teams agree? Probably not, to be honest. I don't see them agreeing, but that's going to be a big drama of the next, couple of months after the FIA say, yep, they're approved, but then it's on the teams and the sports to agree to it, and they're probably not going to, and that's going to cause quite a lot of drama, I imagine. Helmut Marko's also been talking about Liam Lawson, who's done a stellar job so far in the AlphaTauri, replacing Daniel Ricciardo, saying that his contract in full-time Formula 1 could happen quickly. If Lawson continues performing as he has been in Singapore and Suzuka, as he did in Zandvoort and Monza, he will be in conversation for an AlphaTauri seat next season. Where will that be? Who will that be in place of? Is that in place of Ricciardo? Is that in place of Tsunoda? Especially if Perez is gone from Red Bull and Norris comes in instead. Perez isn't going to go to AlphaTauri. He's probably going to retire at that point, I would say, if Perez does get kicked out of Red Bull, or he might join a team further down, maybe like a Sauber, but that seems a little bit doubtful. So yeah, Liam Lawson is definitely making a good name for himself at the moment. And just another Helmut Marko quote, because he's been absolutely popping off lately. We saw the words the other day from Toto Wolff saying that no, the records don't matter. Well done, Max, you got 10 in a row, but who really cares? Nobody reads Wikipedia anyway. Helmut Marko has responded to this in kind and says, Wikipedia is one of the most read mediums. Maybe someone could tell Toto Wolff that. We go about our business without making up all these sorts of stories like they do. And this is honestly the dagger, really. But we won't worry about Mercedes, Wolff, or Hamilton until they become a serious rival for us again. And this is just like classic Marko, but it's also a bit of a dagger. Like if you're Mercedes, or if you're a Mercedes fan reading this, you're like, he actually kind of cooked there, because right now, to be fair, right now there are no serious rivals for Red Bull, but certainly Mercedes aren't one of them. So yeah, I guess Toto Wolff can say what he wants, but Red Bull are going to be like, do your talking on the track, sunshine, and you can't, because your car isn't good enough right now, and there are lots of improvements that need to be made on that front. And also, it was actually revealed by MUS that Lewis Hamilton during the Grand Prix had quite a serious brake problem. I think this is a talking point, was it not last year? The brakes were causing issues on the Mercedes, but he had a bit of a brake issue that, especially towards the end of the race, the problem got worse. It also, Verstappen was like managing pace. That was also quite possibly overheating brakes that Verstappen had to manage a little bit. So I don't know if it's a similar issue, but apparently 2 more laps of the Grand Prix and Hamilton would have had to retire because the brakes were causing issues. So yeah, quite impressive that Hamilton made the passes that he did and had the pace that he did, given this issue that he was handling. But also an issue for Mercedes that could have caused a retirement. It's definitely suboptimal. And even Hamilton himself has said, look, at this point, we're just kind of waiting until February to get the new car, and then we're going to go again. But of course, Mercedes said the same thing last year and didn't really work out for them with respect to Red Bull. So very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.